It may take work, but there is ample opportunities to recenter American history around to include black slaves and their lives and experiences. And in previous weeks, I've simply shared quotes that I thought were important and meaningful. I will continue to do so this week, but I also think that this week more than ever, it's valuable to listen to these words, thinking about how they show us sides of American slaves that we often simply don't think exist. As an introduction, many of these are from the Library of Congress, Born in Slavery, Slave Narratives from the Federal Writers Project of 1936 to 1938. A lot of incredible people did work to have full interviews with American slaves because, similar to what were happening with the Holocaust right now, they knew that they were all dying out and nobody would be left to remember that history. Here's a little introduction to these given by the project. In 1855, John Little, a fugitive slave who had escaped to Canada, uttered this perceptive commentary upon attempts to convey the realities of the existence that he had fled. "'Tisn't he who has stood and looked on that can tell you what slavery is. 'Tis he who has endured." The views that slavery could be best described by those who had themselves experienced it personally has found expression in thousands of commentaries, autobiographies, narratives, and interviews with those who quote-unquote endured. Although most of these accounts appeared before the Civil War, more than one-third are a result of the ambitious effort of the Federal Writers Project of the Works Progress Administration to interview surviving ex-slaves during the 1930s. The results of these was the Slave Narrative Collection, a group of autobiographical accounts of former slaves that today stands as one of the most enduring and noteworthy achievements of the WPA. Compiled in 17 states during the years 1936 to 1938, the collection consists of more than 2,000 interviews with former slaves, most of them first-person accounts of slave life. To end this rally, I'm going to read a few of these. The first one I want to read is a story by Mary Wallace Bowe of North Carolina. I will also be taking a fair amount of liberties with the language to make it understandable and to make it something that I can even say. In them days, there were peddlers going around giving the country selling things. They toted big packs on their back filled with everything from needles to thimbles to bedspreads and frying pans. One day, a peddler stopped at Miss Fanny's house, one of their owners. He was the ugliest man I've ever seen. He was tall and bony, with black whiskers and black bushy hair, and curious eyes that sat way back in his head. They were looking like a dog's eyes after you done hit him. He sat down on a porch, opened his pack, and it was so hot, he looked tired, and Miss Fanny gave him a cool drink of milk that had been sitting in the spring house. All the time Miss Fanny was looking at these things and buying them, he kept running talk. He asked her how many slaves they had, how many men they had fighting on the Confederate side, and how they were going to do if the slaves were freed. Then he asked her if she knowed anything about Mr. Lincoln. About that time, Miss Virginia, another one of their owners, came through the door and heard what he said. She blazed up like a light wood fire and told that peddler that they didn't want to know nothing about Mr. Lincoln, that they know too much already, that his name was not allowed in the house, that then she said he was nothing but a black devil messing in other folks' business, and that she'd shoot him on sight if he had the chance. The man laughed. Maybe he ain't so bad, he told her. Then he packed his pack and went off down the road, and Miss Virginia watched him till he was out of sight round the bend. 2 or 3 weeks later, Miss Fanny got a letter. The letter was from that peddler. He told her that he was Abraham Lincoln himself, that he was peddling over the country as a spy, and he thanked her for the rest on her shady porch and the cool glass of milk she gave him. When that letter came in, Miss Virginia got so hoppin' mad that she took all the stuff Miss Fanny bought for Mr. Lincoln and made us burn it in an ash pile. Then she made my pappy rake up the ashes and throw them in the creek. I think you understand why I thought to start with that. I could not read that and not think that was worth sharing in these. The rest of the quotes are going to be shorter and more pointed. This one is from John C. Bectom of North Carolina. The masters would tell the slaves to go to work and that they were not free, that they still belonged to them. But one would drop out. Then another would leave. There was little work done around the farm, and finally most of the slaves learned they were free. Abraham Lincoln was one of the greatest men who ever lived. He was the cause of us slaves being free. I didn't think anything of Jeff Davis. He tried to keep us in slavery. I think slavery was an injustice, not right. Our privilege to live right and to live according to the teachings of the Bible, to treat our fellow man right. To do this, I feel we should belong to some religious organization and live as right to near as we know how. This one is from Charlie Barbour of North Carolina. I reckon I was glad we were free, 'cause I knows I won't wake up one morning to find my mammy or some of the rest of my family done sold. I left that day I heard about the surrender, and I fared right good too. I knows them that's not faring so well. I never learned to read and write. I knows I never will. I can't even write a letter to Riley about my old man's pension. I remember the days when Mammy wore a blue handkerchief round her hair and cooked in the great house. She'd sometimes sneak me a cookie or cobbler and fruits. She had her own little garden with a few chickens, and we would have been so happy, except we were always scared of being sold. I'm going to end with this quote by Amsy O. Alexander of Arkansas. And thanks for sticking with me through this. I think the future looks bright. I think conditions will get better. I believe that all is necessary for betterment is cooperation. I believe the younger generation, the way it looks, is pretty bad. I think we haven't done anything like that for them as much as we could do in teaching the youngsters. We need to give them an idea of things. They don't know. Our future depends on our children. If their minds aren't trained, the future will not be bright. Our leaders should have lectured to these people and teach them. When we have young people who dodge the voting because of the poll tax, that is not the right attitude. I don't know what will become of us if our children are not better instructed. The white people are already doing this more than we are. There was a time when children didn't know what besides the foot there was of a chicken. But now young folks nowadays should be taught everything. Thank you. And again, thank you to the individuals who gave their words to this and all the people who worked hard to put this together.